Hi, I'm Daniel Estrada, and this is Engineering Ethics at NJIT. Will be the lecture videos for lessons 10 and 11. Let's go ahead and jump into the lesson. So lesson 10 and 11 is your research project. In this video, I will be discussing the requirements for this project because they're different from normal weeks, and it's a little bit involved. So this video will be very quick, just to explain to you what's required for your assignment this week. There won't be a secret word for the lecture. There will be one for the Hangout, and we'll do Hangouts as normal on Tuesdays for lessons 10 for week 10 and 11. But this lesson, it won't be a lecture. I'm not going to tell you anything except how to do the assignment. I have this all up on Moodle. You can read it yourself. I also have a lot of cases that you might want to consider, but I just made up this little PowerPoint presentation to introduce you to the research project assignment. This lesson video will be the same for lessons 10 and 11. I'll put it on both lessons 10 and 11, but it'll be the same video. You can watch it again if you need to look through the video again. So your requirements for this week is more than a normal week. For one thing, you'll have to write more. Your posts have to be at minimum 600 words. By minimum, that's the grade for an 80%. In a normal week, your minimum is 400 words, and that's what gets you an 80%, or that's what qualifies you for an 80%. For your research projects, for both lessons 10 and 11, I'm asking you to write more. Write 600 words. This is supposed to give you time to explain the research that you've done, not just your own thoughts, but also the research. And so the big additional requirement is that you're going to be required to do research, scholarly library research, not just looking it up online, not just Wikipedia articles, but I want you to track down actual scholarly sources. So that means journal articles published in a peer-reviewed journal. Long-form investigative journalism, that can be in a more widely read, like a newspaper. The Mother Jones article for the Pinto case, Pinto Madness, was published in Mother Jones, which is a popular investigative journalism journal. It's not a peer-reviewed journal, it's an investigative journalism journal. If you find an article like that about your case, very common for the kinds of cases that you'll study, you might be looking at government reports for something like the Challenger explosion. The government reports is one of the primary sources. But you might find out the primary sources, interviews with key players in the event, books that you find that are credible scholarly books, so not just popularizer books, right? If you do something like the Titanic, Titanic has a lot of popularizer books that aren't very scholarly. Track down scholarly resources. That's part of your assignment for this week. You don't have a quiz this week. Instead of a quiz, I'm asking you to do an annotated bibliography. So for you don't only have to use 4 sources, but for 4 of the sources that you use, I'm asking you to do a full annotated bibliography. I'll explain that in a little bit. The point here is that that's 20 points on the annotated bibliography that would normally go to a quiz. So no quiz for lessons 10 and 11. Those points go into your annotated bibliography. So the first step of your assignment is to pick a case. You have to pick a real historical case. So don't use the NSPE Board of Review cases. Those are sort of hypothetical cases or fictionalized cases. I want you to pick a real historical case, something that actually happened. Try to pick something relevant to your career goals. There was a molasses flood in Boston like 100 years ago that sometimes students do that isn't relevant to anyone for any reason at all. All the engineering techniques at the time are different. So don't just pick a historical case because it's a curiosity. Try to pick something that's relevant to your future, your possible career. If you're not going to be an engineer, if you're going to be an architect, pick an architecture case. Or if you're going to be a biomedical scientist, then pick a biomed case. But pick some case that's relevant to your career, or that you expect to encounter, that you expect to run into in your future. And that's also relevant to engineering ethics. So not every engineering disaster is an ethical disaster. Not every major disaster is relevant to engineering ethics. A lot of them are, but you don't have to pick disasters. You can also pick things like bugs, whistleblowers, bugs in computer software, bugs, privacy concerns, things with software. Other kinds of cases, whistleblower cases. that we haven't talked about in class. So you can't pick anything that we've done in class. So you can't pick the Challenger explosion. You can't pick DC-10 or the other plane case that we've already talked about. You can't pick Challenger explosion, Pinto, Deepwater Horizon. You need to pick things that have scholarly research. So scandals that have just broken might not have scholarly sources to consult. I mean, they might. There might be interviews out there that you can that count as primary sources, but very new cases might be more difficult to do the research here, and the research is an important part of the assignment. Your goal should be to educate the class about some case that we haven't talked about already. So the class has a lot of case studies. I've been picking all the case studies, and the entire class has been focused on one case study for every week up until now. But now it's your chance to do your own case study and present it to the class. Students will have to respond in replies as normal. So try to educate class about something you find interesting. Perhaps something you think we've neglected in class, some issue or situation or scenario that you think is interesting that deserves discussion. This is your chance to fill out the syllabus. So once you have a case, your assignment is to conduct the scholarly research, find 4 good sources, provide a full annotated bibliography for those sources. That means citation and annotation. We'll talk about that in a little bit. For lesson 10, so it's the same case for both lessons 10 and 11, but in lesson 10 I want you to focus on the facts of the case. So present what's going on in the case, explain what happens in the case to your fellow classmates. All the relevant facts and details, who was involved, what were the consequences, what actually happened, what was the fallout, were there court cases as a result, how much were the fines, that kind of thing. Explain why you find the case relevant, how it's relevant to your future career. And then for lesson 10, I also want you to provide 2 of your 4 annotated bibliographies. So full annotated bibliography for 2 of your sources. And then in lesson 11, I want you to provide the other 2 annotated sources alongside an ethical analysis of the case. So in lesson 10 is supposed to be the facts of the case, and lesson 11 is supposed to be the ethical dimensions of the case, where you explain the case from the perspective of some of the theories and concepts we've talked about in class. So consequentialism, deontology, virtue ethics, if you want to relate it to the trolley problem, right? These kinds of things. If you want to relate it to other case studies that we've looked at and how they are similar or different. Any other resources from class that we've used, the code of ethics, these kinds of things. So the point of the assignment is to explain another case study, and in lesson 11 I also want you to explain why this case is relevant to engineering ethics, why you think it's worth your peers to think about, what lessons do you draw from the case, and then to include all 4 of your annotated bibliography entries. So you have to do 4 in total. I want you to do 2 in lesson 10 and then 2 new ones in lesson 11, but include all 4. You should do annotated bibliographies for your scholarly sources. If you use other sources, and then any other sources that you use besides these 4, you should just provide a normal citations. At the very least, put a link to the source. If it's a source that I can't just find on the internet, then you want to provide more of a citation so I can track it down. So what I want you to do is your post as normal, and then have your citations at the end. And then for the assignment for lesson 10 and 11, for the first reply of these assignments, I want you to post your annotated bibliography. So post your normal post as normal, first start a thread as normal, write your post. And then for the first reply, you should be the first one making that reply, and you should post your annotated bibliography as a first reply. Post the annotated bibliography for 2 sources in lesson 10, and then all 4 sources in lesson 11. I just want to be able to check what all your sources are. And you should have a normal citations underneath your post. In addition to all of this, I'm asking you to submit your post, including your annotated bibliography, to Turnitin. So on Moodle, you will see not only the normal weekly discussion and your attendance quiz, but there's also this lesson 10 plagiarism check. This is just a turn-in assignment, so you can submit assignments. So in a Word document, write up your post in a Word document with your annotated bibliography, and then submit that in lesson 10 and 11 to turn it in. This is where I do the plagiarism. This is the only week that I'm doing plagiarism checking. This is the first time I'm going to be doing it with Turnitin, so I don't know how it's going to go. I have been doing this by hand before, and I usually catch a lot of people. So I don't know if making it on Turnitin will make it easier to catch people or make people less likely to cheat, but we'll see how it goes. So turn in lesson 10 in a Word document to the plagiarism check, and then submit it as normal, a normal post with your citations in the discussion forum, and then the first reply in your discussion forum should be your annotated bibliography. When I say annotated bibliography, I really mean just something very basic, just a regular citation in APA format, and then a short description, about a paragraph, of why you think the source is useful. The goal of this is to help your reader understand the importance of your sources. The goal of a bibliography in general is to help your readers track down your sources and understand where you're getting your information. So the annotated bibliography is supposed to be an additional help where you sort of explain why the source is useful. So if you go to Wikipedia's annotated bibliography page, they have an example here. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Here's the source. The source citation, this is an APA format. APA, I'm not going to be checking that every comma is in the right place. The thing that's really important is the author's name, the title, the date, and the source. APA format puts those things in this order. So here's the author's name, date, title, and then who published it. If it's a book, this is a book. So if it's a book, you're going to have a publisher like this. If it's a journal, you're going to have a journal title, and then the volume number and edition and so on. If it's some other source, you're going to have to tell me where you got that source. If it's some online source, you're going to have the website and so on. And then about a paragraph just explaining why the source is useful. In particular, not just what information you got from the source, but why this source is a good source for that information, right? So you can get information from Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is not a good source for that information as a primary source, right? You need to track down a primary source. So your annotations should not be about Wikipedia pages. They should be about the primary source that you got your information from. Talking about primary sources, let me. So on the website, I give lots of examples of the kind of sources I'm looking for. I'm sorry. I give a lot of examples of the kind of cases that you might want to consider. Hurricane Katrina, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl. Some of these cases are discussed in your textbook, and your textbook, in their bibliography, cites primary sources that you might want to track down. But then some of these other things, these other cases from the news, from recent memory. I also have the Wikipedia page of industrial disasters, structural failures, whistleblowing cases, and other key engineering ethics cases. Look through these cases, find something that you're interested in. But I will warn you that some of these cases are done quite often. So Chernobyl, for instance, is done quite a lot. And one of the things that you find online, so if you search for Chernobyl, one of the first websites that you get to is this worldnuclear.org website. This is so World Nuclear Association deals with nuclear issues, and they have a lot of information on their website that's very detailed technical information with like charts and very specific discussion of exactly what went wrong. To an engineer, someone who likes facts and details, technical details, this website's a very good resource for understanding what happened. You can use this website perfectly fine, but this is not a primary source. World Nuclear Association is basically basically an encyclopedia article, a secondary source. However, one of the things that makes it a good source is that if you go to the bottom, it has all the sources, all the references that it got its information from, including links to those sources. A lot of these sources are government reports and sort of agency reports. So this is where they're getting the information. This is a write-up of all this information. The write-up is very helpful for you to understand what's going on in the information, but it's not a primary source, and you need to do this. You need to do the scholarly work of actually tracking down the original sources and verifying the information on the website and making sure it all coheres, and then telling your own story about the information. So don't just summarize an encyclopedia article. Don't just summarize a web page like this. You should be giving your own take, your own perspective on these stories in your own words. Don't be quoting your sources extensively, but use your sources to tell your own story. So I will be doing the plagiarism checking here, so make sure you're not just excessively quoting. And the plagiarism policy is in full effect, as you can see on the syllabus. I guess the last thing to say for these videos is just how I'm grading these weeks. So because it's a bigger project, the grading is going to be a little bit different. Normal week's post is worth 50 points, but this week's post, weeks 10 and 11, lessons 10 and 11, will have posts worth 100 points. So it's twice what a normal post is worth. Remember, it's also about 50% more required words. So hopefully that all works out fairly. You have to do 2 replies as normal for both lessons 10 and 11, and those replies aren't changed at all. So it's 30 points total, 15 points each, 150 words minimum requirement as normal. But instead of a quiz, you're going to have an annotated bibliography as the first reply in your thread. It's worth 20 points, no quiz. The annotated bibliography gets 20 points, and I'll put 20 points in your Moodle score as the way I normally grade your posts. That 20 points for your annotated bibliography, that's 5 points evaluating the total quality of your sources. Remember, it's two sources for week 10 and 2 sources for week 11. And so it's basically 10 points each. 2.5 of those points is the quality of the source. 2.5 of those points is the proper citation. And then 5 points is how informative are your annotations. So that's 20 points each. 20 points total for that annotated bibliography. So what this means is that your Moodle's grade will be 150 points for these weeks, which is more than normal. One other note, I think I already mentioned this, but no secret word in this lecture video. The secret words will be in the Hangouts in weeks 10 and 11, which I will do as normal. And then lesson 12, 13, and 14 are all on the ethics of AI, so we move on to another unit after lessons 10 and 11, to lesson 12 in the ethics of AI, which should be fun. I think that's everything I had to say. Yeah, good luck. And I'll see you in Hangouts.